Welcome. Are we live? Seems so. We'll officially start in a few minutes. So if you're watching the recording, skip ahead. Welcome, Blossom. Oh, no sound. That makes sense. How about now? Testing, testing. Okay. Can you hear me now? Testing, testing. Really? Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Testing, testing. All right, cool. Alina, welcome. Nikki, welcome. Dana, welcome. Vanessa, welcome. Rick, welcome. Nadia, welcome. Y, welcome. Les, welcome. Teresa, welcome. Julia, good morning. Let me just double check a sound issue here. Depending on where you're listening from, people are reporting different audio issues. Testing, testing. Okay. We ready? Okay. Welcome. Let's do it. Episode, I already forgot. What is it? 41? That sounds about right. Welcome to Holding Space for Love to Be Seen. My name's Tiger. I'll be your gentle host on this guide inward, looking beyond the stories of the mind, beyond our conditioning, beyond all of our adorable and innocent misunderstandings about what we think is happening, and seeing ourselves, others, and all of life a little bit more clearly. And it's always fascinating because no matter how much we look in this direction, if we see a little bit more of what's real and true, then there's a little bit more love, compassion, and freedom. And so I invite you along on this episode 41. Today we are going to talk about the topic, understanding others with more love. And as always, I guess not always, but in most cases, there was the pre-broadcast reflections posted in numerous locations today. I hope you had a chance to read that, as it is my pre-broadcast reflections. I take the morning and I spend some time kind of drilling into why the topic today is important, also sharing some insight and wisdom just in case you don't get a chance to watch the video. Those pre-broadcast reflections are just a great deep dive into this topic. The format of this program is to finish up the introduction here quickly, and then we're going to do 2 minutes of stillness, which is, let's just call it a sacred opportunity, especially if we're going to spend the next hour together. I think it's such a great opportunity to just be still, not feel like I have to say anything, not feel like we have to rush through something, but we can just honor the space that we're sharing and just take that 2 minutes to collect ourselves, realize that this is where we are, this is what we are engaging in, and so we're just going to be present, open, and available. And then from that stillness, I'm going to start running my mouth about this topic, kind of speaking in a spontaneous manner about understanding others with more love. And then we'll do some Q&R, questions and reflections. If anyone in the live audience wants to type in a comment, ask a question, share an insight, we can explore that a little bit more further. And we will wrap up with a super short and sweet guided meditation, which is a beautiful invitation to help assimilate a lot of the discoveries that we dove into today. So welcome. If this is your first time, super cool to have you here with me. And we are going to begin here with the 2 minutes of stillness. Let's dive into that. Welcome, welcome, welcome. A beautiful reminder. We get to take our time. Don't have to rush through this. And I love that it can be just that. That I don't feel like I have to feel the empty space. And enjoy some beautiful pauses in between the words I say. And so let's just be here together, huh? Maybe we'll see something profound. If not, maybe we can just enjoy ourselves. The title today, Understanding Others with More Love. And this topic was inspired by a listener who sent me a message about their own inquiry and their own adorable human struggle with helping another that they care about, wanting to understand more about the struggle. And so I reflected on that a little bit and came up with this title. And I'm very curious about what I'm going to say about that topic here on this episode. I guess I can start with something that's pretty fundamental for me anyway, as it relates to understanding anything at all. And that is understanding that if I really want to understand, I have to let go. And this is a big challenge, but yet it's paramount if we really want to understand. And so let's very playfully look at the ways we say we want to understand, but really we want what we want. Right? Like I say I want to understand, but really I want you to be how I want you to be. I say I want to understand, but I want you to be this way and not that way. And I invite us to recognize just how impossible it is to understand something if you don't extend an enormous amount of freedom to that something that you're trying to understand. Meaning that if there isn't this freedom, meaning you want something in the future, then there isn't this incredible openness to see what's really happening. We are looking through a filter that's trying to manipulate the experience, manipulate the other person in hopes we get what we want. And it doesn't even have to be another person. This could be understanding money, right? Like if you have this anxiety in you about money that fears not having it or wants it to be this, that, or the other, then you're not really looking to understand what it is beyond all the stories. You're trying to figure out how you can manipulate it. And that's fine if you want to play that game. But I really invite you to see how this is a disaster when it comes to genuinely understanding people. That so often in our own misunderstanding that sees ourselves as less than and not enough, we're looking for other people to compensate that deficiency, which results in wanting people to be our prisoner, wanting people to be this way or be that way, even to the extent of wanting other people to be happy, wanting other people to not have their struggle, wanting other people to be kinder, whatever it might be. Just notice that we have all of these hidden and secret and unconscious agendas that really get in the way from allowing us to see things without a filter, allowing us to see what's actually there rather than trying to turn it into what we want. And naturally, this can be a bit of a challenge if you really think you want that something. Like, let's look at this in a very playful example of a parent that's trying to understand their child's struggle. There can be the underlying agenda that says, I really want you to not struggle, or I really want you to be happy. And I wonder if you can see this, again, in the most innocent and adorable way. How much of that wanting is because you want to feel like a good parent? How much of that wanting for your child to be happy is because you see your child struggling and you think it's your fault? And so you don't want that to be your fault. So you want your child to be how you want them to be so that you can feel like you're doing a good job. And again, super innocent. But the reason I bring this up is because in our attempt to understand someone, if we are disturbed, meaning if we're anxious, if we're jealous, if we're irritated, all of these things, if there's emotional disturbance, then we're in a state of wanting. We think we're missing something. And with that is going to be the projection that if only the other person was different, then I wouldn't be emotionally disturbed. And so that takes precedent over actually understanding what's happening. And the more you understand the nature of suffering and the nature of emotional disturbance, that it doesn't have anything to do with the outside world, then you release the outside world. You release the other person. In the same way that with the parent and the child dynamic, when the parent recognizes, oh, I'm feeling inadequate as I watch you struggle, and I'm interpreting your struggle in a way that says I'm not enough, and I'm being disturbed by my own interpretation. But when I get out of the way, when I see I'm inherently whole and complete, and that this doesn't mean anything about me, then I can open up to your struggle. I can open up to the possibility, the reality, that the struggle is a part of the human experience, and it's a doorway for us to move through our fears. It's a doorway for us to grow. And so in many ways, the struggle just might be perfectly placed. And so you see how you release the other person, you release the struggle, and you open to it, which means we can now actually begin to understand the struggle, right? Rather than me trying to figure out your struggle so that I can conquer my own inadequacy. That's not the approach we're looking for. The beautiful thing about all these things that I point to, and you hear me say this 1,000 times, that if there's suffering, then there's an innocent misunderstanding. Something's not being understood. And as we understand, as we see things more clearly, what was once seen to be a problem is seen that it's not a problem at all. Actually, this is the perfect opportunity for me to expand or grow into the next flavor of my own discovery. So what I'm going through is actually for me to see beyond my own limitations and my own fears. And so let's just see that as foundational, that if we're actually going to understand other people, we have to be willing to let go of them. And that is beautifully your own work to do as it relates to understanding others. Additionally, on this topic, what I find to be incredibly helpful is understanding that any attempt I have to understand something is really an attempt to understand myself. Anything I want to understand in the world, whether I want to understand the stars, whether I want to understand the rain, or understand other people. Ultimately, underneath that, I'm looking to understand this one that I am having this experience. I want to understand myself in relationship to what I see. And this is beautiful because it points to the whole exploration in being human. Like as you run around in the world, understanding this, that, and the other, it's really a self-understanding that's unfolding. And this really, really helps, at least for me in my experience, because seeing that it all points back to understanding myself, I'm not so caught up in understanding others. Furthermore, I realize that I can't understand others. I can only understand my own experience. Which again is a beautiful letting go of the other person. Yes, in a beautiful, playful way, it can appear that I understand others. But that's just what it looks like. As I understand that this is primary, that I'm understanding myself, what has become so obvious is that the more I understand what I am, then by default, there is the appearance of understanding others. And this is quite evident because fundamentally, human beings are the same. Yes, we're having different experiences. Yes, we're telling different stories. But fundamentally, we are all wanting the same thing, and we are all afraid of the same thing. But yet we all have different stories about that something we want and about that something that we fear. I really invite you to see just how deeply true this is. But in order to see the depth of truth in it, we have to look beyond all the stories that we tell. To illustrate this, again, let's just go back to the parent-child dynamic. The parent that says, I want my child to be happy, that's the narrative. That's the story. But yet within the parent is a deeper wanting that's giving rise to that surface want or that projection. And one of the great ways to figure out what that deeper want is to simply ask yourself, why? Why do you want your child to be happy? And then the answer goes, well, I want my child to be happy because I care about them. Okay. What would that mean for you if your child was happy? Well, then I could relax. Okay. And what does being able to relax help you see or realize? My point being is if you chase this why all the way back, essentially what you're going to discover is that the reason I want this is so that I can recognize that all is well. So that I can recognize that what I am is whole and complete. And again, hear me, because I'm putting words to something that can't actually be defined. Like when I say we all want the same thing, any word that I come up with that says what we all want is just a story. And so what we all want can't actually be named, but when you dig into your own sincerity, you might find words for it, but the words slightly fail. But to dig into what you really want, there's this recognition that I want to see the wholeness of what I am. Likewise, on the other side of this coin, it ties in nicely to what we fear. We can ask ourselves, well, what are you so afraid of? And if you trace this back, in some way or another, it's going to be communicated as, I'm afraid that I'm not enough. I'm afraid that I'm unwhole. I'm afraid that I'm not worthy. I'm not lovable. And you see, this is the opposite of what we're looking for, which I find to be quite fascinating because it ties our desire and our fear together in such a way that we all want the same thing, but we're all afraid of the same thing. And that something is the same thing, which is we want to be whole and complete, but we're afraid that we're not. And as it speaks to the nature of being human, and as it relates to suffering in general, what's important to see is that all of the suffering, all of the emotional disturbance can trace itself back to the perception that I'm not enough. To see myself as unwhole or incomplete, even to the extent where maybe a loved one dies. And the suffering in that is that the self that I am now feels incomplete, feels like I'm missing something, feels like I should have done something, I should have said something, right? There's this perception of incompleteness. Something was lost. And likewise, when you feel fantastic, there's the perception of wholeness. I see myself as enough. I see myself as worthy. I see myself as not missing anything. Now look at all of the different stories that can be added to this. Whether it's the loss or the gain of a job, right? The story. I lost the job, and that's why I'm suffering. Well, is it because you lost the job, or is it because you now see yourself as not enough? Right? Like, what's below the story? And there'll be a perception that says, I'm missing something. Likewise, if you get a job and you say, I'm so happy because I got the job, the story. But underneath the story, why? Why does getting a job make you feel happy? Oh, I see myself as enough. I see myself as worthy. Okay, so you see this mechanism. This all comes back to seeing yourself more clearly. This all comes back to seeing what you are in a way that's more true. And this speaks also to the primary spiritual invitation, which is the remedy for suffering, which is to see more of what's true. Because if you look beyond all the mind's stories, if you look beyond all the confusions and the misunderstandings, the truth of reality is that what you are is whole and complete. This is never in question. However, when you go looking for yourself where you're not in the mind, you'll find all sorts of stories that say you're not enough. You'll interpret other people's comments and actions as meaning you're not enough. And this is all looking for yourself where you're not, right? The truth of reality isn't in the mind. It's not in the stories. The truth of reality is here right now beyond all the mind's content, which of course is why the spiritual invitation is to be present, be still, and know. Be still and see what's true. And in that truth, you'll discover that all of the things you're thinking about yourself as not being enough just isn't true. And when you really see that it's not true, then the suffering subsides. That's a very quick recap of the spiritual invitation. And how is this relevant to understanding others? Well, it's so beautifully relevant because when somebody is having a really tough time they're lost in their story. And they're lost in their story, assuming that what they are perceiving really means that they're not enough. So say you're talking to somebody who is struggling with trying to figure out their life, what they should do, what other people are thinking, and they want so badly for it to be this way, and they want so badly for it to be that way, and they're having a really hard time. Now, if I understand the fundamental issue here, which is that it's not about any of that, really, they're not seeing the truth of what they are, and they're scared. I don't have to be afraid of their fear. I don't have to be afraid of their dilemma. And I don't have to wrap myself up in their story as if it's true, right? Like, oh, if only this could happen, then you could be free. Then you would be whole and complete. So I don't have to energize that story, right? And like figure out how can this happen. What I can do is I can hold a space that invites them to see beyond their story. And this can happen without even saying anything about these things that I'm talking about. Really, it's more of an energy that you're bringing to the situation than it is the words that you say. It's kind of like in therapy. You go to this space of non-judgment that just allows you to express yourself, and you run your mouth about all your stories. And then the therapist, in some way, if they're good, they're holding a space that invites you to see how insane your stories are, how impossible they are, and how they are limiting your experience and they don't serve you at all. And so you see there's a space that's held that allows you to unravel the confusion. And it's a space of genuine support that sees your wholeness, right? That sees there's actually nothing wrong with you. Now, granted, that might not be said in a tactful way because it could be offensive in that moment. But there's an energy of love and support that sees wholeness, that sees that you're just struggling, that sees that you are confusing your mind for reality. And so as it relates to understanding others with more love, for me, this is the more love part, right? It's like you're seeing them with eyes of love. You're seeing them, but seeing their wholeness, even though they can't see it. And I think we'd be amazed at how supportive this could actually be. Imagine putting yourself in that situation where you're struggling and you're having a hard time, and you don't necessarily want someone to fix you. You just want to be able to voice your concern. You just want to get it out and not be judged, right? That's a very important key. What we crave is a space of non-judgment, that we can just be human for a moment, be confused, be lost, and allow ourselves to take a breath and just get it out. And that's much easier to do in a space of non-judgment. Now, the difficulty here, as it relates to holding this space and understanding others, is that we often look at other people's struggles through our own confusion. And that confusion, again, comes back to what we want for them. And I really invite you to see this, because for me, this is so profound, and there's a playful difficulty in communicating it. So I wonder if you hear what I'm saying. to give people back to themselves. It's to also understand that they are where they're supposed to be in order to expand through their difficulty. And this is something that I recognize when I talk to people one-on-one. It's like they can show up in whatever struggle they're having. But for me, it's so obvious that this is the perfect struggle for you right now. Right? It's not we need to get rid of the struggle. It's not that something's going wrong. It's, can there be a space for us to see what's really happening here? You see, that's an extension of freedom that gives them back to themselves. It's like, I don't need to fix you. I don't need to solve this for you. I'm going to hold a space and help you see this more clearly so that you can figure it out. And this is such a different energy than wanting something from them, even wanting them to not struggle. So yeah, I invite you to explore that. There's another aspect to this, which I think is beautiful to explore as it relates to understanding others with more love. And that's understanding other people who are unkind and violent, which really speaks to our interest in understanding others. Like, how do we deal with that? How can we understand it in a more loving and compassionate way? Like I already mentioned, this invitation to understand other people is an invitation to understand yourself. So if you want to understand other people's unkindness and their violence, you understand your own unkindness and your own violence. And then it becomes quite obvious. And let me see if I can illustrate this. What I've recognized in my experience as it relates to flavors of unkindness and violence that flow through what I am is it's so profoundly obvious, first and foremost, that when I'm unkind or violent, I'm scared. Just notice this, that you cannot be unkind or violent without being scared. Even though when you're in that energy of unkindness and violence, it's not uncommon to proclaim that you're not scared. But yet, after you calm down and look more honestly, you'll recognize that you're terrified. And of course, we ask, okay, well, scared of what? And this brings us back to the original exploration, which is we all want the same thing and we're all afraid of the same thing. And the fear is that I'm not enough. The fear is that I'm missing something, which again is to say, I don't see what I am. I'm not seeing myself clearly. I'm lost in a dream. And the more lost I am, the more I'm going to blame the outside for my confusion. I'm going to blame the outside for my perception of not being enough. And in that blame, there'll be an expression of unkindness and violence towards that something that I blame. For example, very simple illustration. If I send an email to somebody and they don't respond, if that disturbs me emotionally in any way at all, can you see that that can only happen because I interpret that experience as meaning I'm not enough? Right? I'm not being respected. Maybe the person doesn't like me. Maybe I said something wrong. I'm observing what's happening, somebody not responding to my email, and I'm creating reasons that proclaim I'm deficient in some way. And that will scare me because that's the thing I'm scared of. Now, the more lost I am in that, I'll believe my story. Oh, I feel this way because XYZ. Because they didn't reply to my email. And so I will be unkind towards them, right? I blame them for my own interpretation. And what I recognize in all of my own experiences of being unkind is after I'm done throwing my tantrum and I see things more clearly, I realize, oh my goodness, it wasn't about them at all. Do you recognize that? My emotional experience of being disturbed wasn't about them at all. Sure, I came up with fantastic stories that said it was about them. And maybe I have this conditioning that has spent my whole life believing that other people can make me feel a certain way, right? Because that's what I was taught. We were all taught that. It's just not true. Nobody has the power to make you feel unfree. Only you can do that. Nobody has the power to make you see yourself as less than. Only you can do that. And so if this is true, and I've yet to find a way around it, then I flip it around for other people who are unkind. And you know what I recognize most that makes it super easy to deal with this? Which also speaks to why it's difficult to deal with this. I recognize that their unkindness has nothing to do with me at all. Same with their violence. And what makes these things difficult? The idea that it's personal, right? Which is the same confusion that was the whole problem to begin with. Me interpreting things that say I'm less than, right? So their confusion is creating an expression of unkindness. Then my confusion about their unkindness creates more unkindness. Right? Their interpretation that they're not enough creates the expression of what we all call unkindness. Then I interpret their unkindness as meaning I'm not enough. This is where you get unkindness for unkindness. This is where you get violence for violence. And how's that going? There's no opportunity for healing there at all. It just creates a bigger mess, which is perfect because as it becomes more loud, it invites us to look and say, wait, what's really going on here? And then beyond all the noise, what you'll find is that, oh, this is just an innocent misunderstanding. It completely changes the dynamic as you see that these things are not personal at all. It completely changes the dynamic when you encounter someone that's unkind and you see that it's an expression of them not seeing themselves clearly and they're scared that they're not worthy of love. Can you see how that would change the dynamic when you understand? It also changes the dynamic of how you relate with yourself, which is the point of all of this, because it's all a healing of the relationship we have with ourselves. To be able to recognize that cue that when you start being unkind to others, it is a flag that says you're being unkind to yourself. When you start watching any flavor of violence be expressed from your being, it's trying to get you to see that you're being violent to yourself. You cannot be violent on the outside without first being violent on the inside. There's no way around this. Whatever is showing on the outside is simply showing what's on the inside. which is so perfect as to why it shows itself on the outside, so that we can see it. And when you see that it's all a reflection of what's on the inside, when you understand that fundamentally, then you see what's on the outside in a very different way. You don't see it as in the way. You don't see it as an obstacle. You see it as a teacher. You see it as a teacher that in some way is pointing to an opportunity for healing, is pointing to an opportunity to allow more love to flow, right? It is exposing the barrier to love. This is what helps us to grow. So again, as it relates to understanding others with more love, this isn't something that you do, which is my favorite part. The invitation is just to see things more clearly, to see beyond the stories, beyond the projections. And as you see more of what's true as it relates to others, which is really yourself, then a natural byproduct of that is to share more love. Maybe more accurately, the natural byproduct is to see more love. And as you see more love, then it's impossible to not share more love, because seeing more love is the sharing of love. Oh my goodness. As you see love, you're sharing love. Which is like saying, when you see compassionately, you're sharing compassion. Things are natural byproducts of seeing what's true. As you see what's true, love is the result. As you see what's true, compassion is the result. As you see what's true, freedom is the result. Which again, I mention it quite often, that the spiritual invitation isn't to do these things, right? The spiritual invitation isn't to be more loving, isn't to be more compassionate, isn't even to be free. The spiritual invitation is to see what's true. And as you see what's true, all of these other things are given to you, right? So let that be the primary focus. See what's true, which is also to say the primary focus is understanding. Because again, like I mentioned in the beginning, to really understand something, you have to let go of what you want. You have to be empty. Now, most people, even in the spiritual realm, we want more love. We want more compassion. We want more freedom. You're not going to understand what's really happening if you have all those wants. This is why, again, the invitation in some way says, let go of all of that. Just see what's true. Let the truth be the priority, not what you think you want. Because when you say, I want love, compassion, and freedom, you're turning those into conditional things. You're turning those into very limited ideas, where you say, oh, I want love, and so it has to look like this, then that will be love. No, that's conditional love, which isn't love at all. Or I want more freedom, and it would look like this and not like that. No, you're just creating another expectation. Get in touch with real freedom, which comes by way of seeing what's true. Get in touch with real understanding of other people by letting go of them. And again, there's a bit of courage here that invites you to let go of what you want for other people. And it's understandable. I mean, of course, in some way, we want other people to be happy. We want other people to not suffer. We want other people to not struggle, which is kind of like saying, I don't want life to be life. How's that going? Maybe this is the perfect moment of struggle that exposes a breakthrough, right? Maybe this is the degree of suffering that brings a profound discovery that opens the floodgates of love. We don't know. And so maybe, just maybe, life knows exactly what it's doing. Right? Maybe, and again, this is something that we see as we see the truth of life. We see in some way that life doesn't make a mistake. Right? We project mistake because we're not getting what we think we want. Life messed up. I didn't get what I wanted. Life messed up. I'm struggling. No, life knows exactly what it's doing. Okay. Man, we really zipped through that. Where are we at on time here? Oh, wow. Any questions that arise for you guys? Maybe we can quickly do the Q&R. And I can speak to some things. Not a question, but looks like a beautiful comment. Laura says, wow, everything you were talking about is happening in my life. Daughter called last night and isn't happy. I have a prospective client who is ghosting me, and I struggle to see how my response to both of these things has to do with how I feel about my own feelings. That's great. Yeah, look at that. Look at the emotional disturbance in those things happening and see how there's an interpretation that says I'm not enough. And my God, if I had a quarter for every time I interpreted something as meaning that I'm not enough, only later to find out, in all cases, it didn't really mean that. Or even someone doesn't reply to my message and then I come up with some fantastic story that I find out was just so far removed from the truth, which has been a great teacher for me to let go of other people in the world. Where it's like, if somebody doesn't respond, it's like, there's a million reasons why not. And I could never possibly know. So maybe I'm going to ask, right? Maybe I'll reach out again. So many times. You know what's a great example of this? And this is a fun practice that I've been doing. If somebody unsubscribes from an email, I send them a message and just let them know that, hey, FYI, it looks like you unsubscribed. No worries. Thank you so much for your support, but I just wanted to double check. And over 50% of the time, it was an accident or they didn't know, which is hilarious because in some way you could see that somebody opts out of your thing and you can think, oh man, it means I'm doing something wrong, or it means this, that, and the other, right? About my worth and value. And yet that's not what's happening at all. It's an innocent misunderstanding. And even if they do opt out, it doesn't mean anything. You can make it mean whatever. And so there's such a beautiful opportunity to see through all these shenanigans and see how much it's limiting your experience, how much it's getting in the way of you being focused and doing what you're here to do, which is sharing massive amounts of love. Beautiful. All right. I didn't see. Oh, here's a question. Alma says, why do we readily conclude everything is about us and that we are not enough, not worthy, or loved? Why is this such a common default? That's beautiful. Julia, I see your huge donation coming in there. Thank you so much. That's a beautiful question, Alma. Why are we so determined to take things personally? I've answered this question a million times. I love it. In a very short and direct way, the ego is looking for validation constantly. That's how it survives. The ego survives because you think about the ego. And if the ego wants to survive, it wants you to constantly be thinking about it, which means it wants you to constantly try to survive it. And so it makes everything about it. Right? What does this mean about me? Validate me. Prove that I exist. Right? Taking things personally is a way of saying that who I think I am is real. Right? This is about me. And it's never about you, which apparently is a tough one for some people. But there's a very profound discovery to realize that nothing's personal. But yet we also really, really, really want it to be personal. And this is all mind noise, right? Taking things personally is a mind activity. And it's there for one purpose, which is to validate who you think you are. Which there is a beautiful discovery to see that who you think you are doesn't exist at all. That the ego is a completely imaginary character that will never be validated. So you can stop trying. And when this is really seen, then we stop taking things personally. Now, it's a bit of a journey for some. There's a lot to unravel, but just keep looking. Keep investigating. Is this really about me? Or am I just making it about me? Is this that pattern on repeat where I'm looking for the world to tell me that I exist? And this is so pervasive in the most adorable way. It's so pervasive for our imagined sense of self-importance to look for validation in the world. But again, in this searching for the self, we're looking for the self where it's not, which is we're looking in the mind. We're looking in what other people think. And you're not going to find any truth there. You're just going to find more stories, which is why it's never complete, right? Which is why it goes on and on and on and on. Because it's not real. There's a completely different way of operating beyond this standard operating procedure of ego. And it can be completely unfamiliar for people, even to the degree of being completely scary for people, to the point where we reject the possibility. It's like to step into that much of the unknown, to step into a life that doesn't need people to validate you, a life that doesn't take things personally. For many people, that's scary, especially when you've lived your whole life seeking that sort of validation. It's like, well, what else am I going to do? All right. Let us jump into the guided meditation. And as always, this will be beautifully spontaneous. So we just get to see what happens. Let's dive in. Welcome to this moment. I invite you to hang out with me here for just a few. We're going to invite ourselves to come back to life. Invite ourselves to release some resistance and recognize that in this moment right now, everything's okay. Let's allow the breath to bring us back to this moment. Can we recognize that all of our agitation, all of the anxiety, all of the frustration and the irritation, everything within us that seems to be disturbed is because we're scared. It's not wrong, not bad. But can we just see that for a moment? In our acknowledgement of this, I invite us to go a little bit deeper and see that everything we're scared of is in the mind. See that. In this moment right now, in the most adorably human way, we can find some fear. But yet, the more we look at it, we see that we're not afraid of anything in life, here, right now. We're not afraid of anything that's true, here and now. We're simply afraid of the mind's content, threatening us with the possibility that what we are is not enough. Threatening us with the possibility that we're separate from life. We're afraid of the mind's content. Thinking that it's reality. It's not. So in these moments together, come back to reality. See so deeply that in this moment right now, there's nothing to be afraid of. even if you're scared, you don't have to be afraid of that. Maybe you can see how adorable it is to be afraid of the imaginary monsters in the mind. Come home. Breathe into this discernment, a discernment that can see the difference between the reality of life here and now and the noise in the mind pretending to be reality. But really, it's just a dream. Isn't that amazing? Can we discover a profound gratitude in the realization that there's nothing to be afraid of in life? You can review your whole imaginary history and see that you were never afraid of anything in life. We were only afraid of the mind's content. And yet, throughout it all, we were held by life. So whatever you're going through now, however scary it might seem, recognize the adorable misunderstanding that confuses the dream for reality. Let's just take a moment and breathe into this. Breathe into this realization that in life, in what's real and true, right now, there's nothing to fear. Okay. Go play. And thank you for meditating with me today. How awesome is that? You guys having fun? I enjoy this show. I enjoy showing up here on Tuesdays and hang out with you guys. I saw some more donations come in. Thank you for supporting this work. It's playfully super helpful. And it's only because people like you support what I do that I'm able to keep showing up and doing it. So we get to do this together. As always, if you have any more topic ideas for future episodes, send me a message, let me know. If what I'm saying seems like it touches your heart, but you're still just super, super confused and hurting, send me a message. I might be able to clarify some things. I appreciate you. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for courageously looking in this direction. And let's just continue on the journey and see what happens. Thanks so much. It might also be worth mentioning there are 2 spots left for the retreat coming up in March 24th. And if you're digging this stuff, my goodness, I just really, really invite you to come on retreat, spend a week with us, and allow yourself to melt into this discovery. It's really great because we get to just set everything else aside for a minute, right? The busyness of our lives, which is really just mind noise. And we can take some moments and just see these things so clearly and let them take over. See that it's okay to just surrender it all. Super, super beautiful. All right. Till next time. Cheers.